Gentlemen,
Thank you.
whoever was the cheering person, I'll give you that $20 later. Thank you.
That was me.
All right, so I'm Scott Mullins, and I am the Director of Business and Market Development for AWS and the financial services industry around the world. And as part of my job, I have the privilege to work with companies that are on the leading edge of changing the industry. And a lot of the times when I talk to companies, I get asked about what's coming next. What's the future of the business? And many times people look at companies like Amazon.com, our parent company, as an example of a company that's been very successful in building a platform and scaling a platform, whether it's on the retail side of our business or at AWS. And so what we're going to do over the next 25 minutes or so is talk about another company that has built a successful platform and has built a community around that platform. And in today's economy, platforms and communities are very hot topics, as we all know. Everybody wants to know how to build a successful platform or a community. And this is not something new. Platforms are not new. Communities are not new. This goes back to even well before MySpace, if we want to start at that kind of juncture in time. I live in a building on the Upper East Side here in New York. And there is a Peloton facility right in the bottom of my building. That's another great example of a community. So we'll spend time talking about the platform that is StockTwits, the community that exists around that particular platform. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Ian Rosen, the CEO of StockTwits, as well as Anthony DiMarco, the CTO of StockTwits, to talk about really the art of the possible, what's coming next in capital markets. It was great to hear Angie and Phil talk about NASDAQ and the journey they've been on in the cloud. I'm looking forward to being able to chat with these guys about how capital markets is changing, how investing is changing, and how they're helping to do that over at StockTwits. So, Ian, over to you to introduce yourself, and then Anthony, a little bit about yourself as well, and then we'll talk about StockTwits.
Sure. I'm Ian Rosen, CEO of StockTwits. I've been CEO for a little over 3 years. I was not the founder, but I was a long-time champion of StockTwits when I was general manager of MarketWatch, which is how a lot of people knew me before then. And also a longtime critic of StockTwits because they had this large, organically growing community, and I wanted to make it bigger and better, and got the opportunity to take this role.
I'm Anthony DiMarco. I'm the CTO of StockTwits. I've been here for about 6 months longer than Ian. I have a long history building software, in particular in the last 5 or 10 years, cloud-native, scalable software on AWS.
Thanks, guys. So we are talking about communities for the next 20 minutes or so. So there might be some interaction. You can't have a community without interaction. So just be prepared, because I've had a chance to actually see Ian in action, and actually we've been on some things together. So you might get asked some questions over the next several minutes. So please pay attention. So Ian, there may not be a lot of folks in the audience that know what StockTwits is. Do you want to take a poll real quick and see who knows what StockTwits is?
Yeah, I'm actually curious with this audience. How many people know StockTwits? Raise your hand, please.
Okay.
Maybe 15%?
How many are StockTwits users? Any StockTwits users in the audience? Okay.
Well, it's interesting. There are a lot of people that probably can't admit that because I think some institutional people are not allowed.
It's Chatham House rules today. It's Chatham House rules today. So, given that response, why don't we take a minute and start with what is StockTwits?
Sure. So, for those who don't know, StockTwits is the largest social network for investing and trading. We have just about 2 million users. They tend to range on the younger side. About 80% of them are under 44. About 60 or 70% of them are under 35. You can think of it a little bit like a Facebook or a Twitter, but specifically for investing. We are a moderated community, and our community spends about 50 minutes a day for each user, time on site for active users, which is very, very, very high. They are highly engaged. We are an organically growing community standing in front of a wave of young people who tend to make all decisions, including investing decisions, and how to be better investors through social and discovery means. So having the largest community to do that means that we just benefit from standing in front of that wave. Our users spend, they share about 200,000 messages every single day across about 15,000 tickers, which could be equities, but it could also be ETFs or cryptos, and it depends on what's hot. And like I said, they're very engaged. They are there for 2 reasons. They are there, we've surveyed this dozens of times. They are there because it's fun, and they enjoy interacting with each other around investing and trading and learning from each other. and they're there to get better. That's what they do.
So we've got some images in the background, obviously of the platform itself, and we'll show some of those as we scroll through for those of you who don't maybe are not familiar with StockTwits. How did it get its start?
Right. So we're about 10 years old, maybe a little over 10 years old, and if you remember what was going on back in 08 and 09, the so-called experts, of which at that point I certainly was part of that group of people that were part of the institutions, were getting it wrong a lot. There were a lot of financial media and other places where social finance was starting to become a thing, Yahoo message boards, places like that, but there were a lot of bad actors. If people remember back then, there were a lot of people that were not behaving well on these platforms, that they were in some cases trying to take advantage of other people. But this idea of having a community of people who could, in a moderated, healthy way, learn from each other and discuss investing and trading in stocks and markets and companies was something that was sorely needed. So the company was founded in 08 to provide a moderated, safe, healthier place for those conversations to happen. And as people who know communities know, they either take off or they don't. You can't say, here's $5 million, go build a community. You say, either you hit that lightning in a bottle or you don't. And the time for StockTwits was right. And our community has grown completely organically year over year over year in accelerating ways because that conversation needs to happen and needs to happen in a safe way.
So you mentioned moderation a couple times, and I want to hit on that a little bit because there are probably many of us in the audience that remember IRC chat rooms, and
I'd like to see a hand raise on that one actually.
Okay, fine, we can do that. It's a community. We're in a community. We have two people that remember IRC chat rooms. Actually, more people remember IRC chat rooms.
It's just a reflection of average age, I think.
And now, obviously, we all know that some of those rooms can lead to, back in the day, activity like pump and dump and other schemes in the industry. How do you make sure that in your community, in that platform that you operate, that isn't happening?
So this is incredibly important because if you're going to have these conversations and you're going to build mentoring relationships or friendships or whatever, first of all, you can't have the noise of people who are in some cases professional bad actors, pump and dumpers, et cetera. And in sort of the best case, just sort of one-off people you can't trust. So we do that three ways. So we have a tremendous amount of software, which Anthony can speak to much more eloquently than I can, that actually catches a significant number of people before they even post that message. We know people who were prior bad actors. We know the kinds of things that look like it's a problem. We know that there are some people who will set up maybe 15 different accounts in a second from the same IP address, and we won't let that get on. So there's a software layer that catches things that are very obviously problematic. A lot of our community is moderated by the community itself. These are people who are protective of the conversations that they've been in, and they have relationships around some of these streams. Like maybe Apple and Tesla, you have thousands and thousands of people, but some of these streams that StockTwits organizes itself around, or rooms that StockTwits organizes itself around, have communities of people that know what's right or not, and they will flag things on their own, and if enough things get flagged, our community team will dive in. And that's the third way, which is that we have a community team of people who are as passionate about investing and trading in companies as any of our members. In fact, we actually hire them from the community often, and they will dive into conversations and be like, hey guys, take it easy, or this is a problem, or you're violating our terms of service. And if any of you end up at our office ever, we have sort of a wallpaper wall of people asking to be unbanned, because we kick thousands and thousands and thousands of people off the platform, and some of them are, most of them we think are right, but sometimes we get it wrong, and please unban me, I'm an artist, I was drunk when I said that, and, let me back. And we had somebody that drove down from Utica, New York one time because he was banned repeatedly, and he wanted to discuss with our community manager, which is honestly a little bit scary, and it turned out this guy was fine, but we have passionate users.
Well, I think you kind of softballed me for my next question.
Yeah, great.
I think passionate users are obviously what leads to growth in a business like this. Let's talk about growth, and I want to talk in two ways. Number one, from the standpoint of the business, and then obviously, Anthony, as you grow a business that's based on a platform, that platform has to scale as well. So from a technology perspective, I want to pivot to you after I get Ian to tell us about the growth of the business itself. How did the company grow organically in the beginning, and then how are you fostering growth now?
Yeah, sure. So In the beginning, I think the time, like I said, lightning strikes or it doesn't, and the timing was good for StockTwits, but in a lot of ways, and when we show some of our metrics and people are like, oh, I didn't realize you guys are so big.
Well, some of them are behind you on the screen right now.
We're an overnight success, 10 years old, but which is the way those things tend to work. If you do the right things over and over and over again, then people find them organically, and we didn't go out and spend a bunch of money on marketing. We spend no money on marketing, actually. So in the beginning, the time was right to have this conversation. People, some of the bigger names in social finance who people may know, like the Josh Browns and the J.C. Peretzes and others, were building their businesses and their reputations and their followings on StockTwits at the time because it was a place where you could have that happen in a clear, easy way. So if you have the opportunity, especially 10 years ago, to have direct interactions with people that were considered to be smart and willing to teach others and willing to engage with you directly. If you remember Twitter and all the social platforms back then, this was a tremendous change. You didn't have to go to the person in your firm. You could talk to the leading expert in the world who was willing to talk with you. And we were just the right place, right time. So we've grown organically since then because people just tend to find us and the network builds itself. Today, we benefit from significant SEO, and we're all those kinds of things, and almost all of our traffic finds us sort of directly or through search or just from people recommending us to their friends. But we are beginning to expand our reach into other platforms. I met a gentleman, barely a gentleman, he's like 19 years old, where I go in the summer, and he said, oh, I can't believe you're at StockTwits. I love StockTwits. And I said, oh, you're on the platform? What's your username? And he said, oh, what platform? He only knew us from Instagram because our Instagram following has grown bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just funny market memes, and they like to follow that. We also have blogs and Twitter, and we just try to take the intelligence that's in the markets every day that most of you probably know, and the great stories that are happening day in and day out, and say, you know what, this is not something that you may follow, that you are deep in markets every single day and know every little twitch that's happened. But there's a cool thing that happened today, and we're gonna push that out there in a fun way and engage people who otherwise would think that finance would be either hard or boring or both.
So I'm going to also play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon with you on this. I happen to be in Dallas, where my family is from, over the Christmas break last year, and I was playing golf with my brother-in-law because in Dallas it's about 75 degrees over Christmas. He said, hey, have you heard about this thing called StockTwits? And I said, absolutely, StockTwits is a customer of AWS. They run on us, and we've had an opportunity to have a relationship for a long time. Anthony, my brother-in-law knows about StockTwits. Obviously, that's based on the growth and the popularity of the platform. How on earth do you build a platform that can scale for social finance?
So when I came on board, we initially had servers in racks and a co-location facility. So we had scalability problems, which is the biggest thing that AWS has helped us deal with. At that time, because we only had a limited number of servers, we had to over-provision. So a lot of our servers were sitting idle most of the time, and if we hit a huge spike in traffic, which is really common for us based on market events, basically we would crash at the worst possible time.
And then what would happen?
I get woken up. Somebody gets woken up.
He has to get woken up by me or others.
So the first thing that we did when we shifted to AWS is we went to a model where we can scale elastically. So we are only using the amount of compute that we need based on the amount of traffic that we have coming in. And it has the added benefit that if we have a huge spike in traffic, we can simply scale out to meet that, and we don't crash at the worst possible time. So we have a microservices architecture. We're actually deployed on Kubernetes at the moment. AWS's managed Kubernetes platform.
EKS?
Yep, EKS. And increasingly, we're moving toward a completely serverless model where we don't even have to manage clusters of servers at all.
So obviously, as a CTO, you've got all the tools at your disposal. When you're working with your developers, how do you guys think about development on the platform? Obviously, this is an organic platform. It grows and it changes, and you kind of have to follow that growth and keep your finger on really the pulse of what's happening in the platform. How do you encourage your team to respond to what's happening in the community to actually get ahead of that from a product development perspective?
So One of the nicer parts about being able to provision all of these environments and services with AWS is that we can do it programmatically. And so each one of our developers at the push of a button can spin up his own replica of our entire production stack. So this lets us experiment very easily with any ideas that might come along, because you don't need to go out to a staging environment, tinker with that, test something in production. What you actually can do is just have a complete replica of the whole stack.
Got it. So why do you think, both of you, why do you think people so readily share information on StockTwits? If you've got this great trading idea, I'm an old equity trader. I didn't really share my ideas openly. Why are people sharing so openly about their nuggets of wisdom here?
So this is a great question, and there's a funny anecdote that goes with it. We had a marketing person once who was saying something to the effect of, I don't know, I would just never say it that way, or I'd never share it that way. And our COO looked at her and said, do you argue with strangers on the internet? And she's like, no. He's like, well, that's what our users do. They really like to engage with each other. They're there for fun. They are often, I think trading and investing in general can be if you're not, especially if you're a retail investor and that's not part of your job, and you can't look to the person in the desk next to you, it's a solitary activity, and it's something where you're trying to learn, you're trying to get better, and for some people it's their life, and some people it's a hobby. But if you look at the messages on StockTwits, and sometimes people will try to compare, like, oh, is this like a message board? And the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because 60% of the conversations of these 200,000 messages a day that are happening are responses to other people. They're constant engages, and we're not just a community of people talking into a big room. It's actually a community of communities. So we organize in two ways. We organize by tickers, so you can get onto the Apple stream, but you might just as likely be on a much more thinly traded stock, and those people know each other, and if something happens to that stream, or they've been interacting with each other for years, and it's their friends. That's what they enjoy talking about these things. The other way, which we just launched, which I think was on the
One more?
okay, the rooms. Yeah, so we recently realized that in order to facilitate all the conversations that our members want to have, it's not always around a company. Sometimes it can be around Brexit or esports or cannabis investing or all these different topics. So we launched something called Rooms, so people can set them up. And if you're familiar with Reddit, it's like having a subreddit. Anyone can set up any room. On the first couple days that we allowed this, 6,000 rooms were set up, and people were just jumping on like interesting names, and they moderate these things themselves, and we have a community of communities. So the answer to your question is, if you are interested in investing or trading or learning about those things, or just sort of sharing your wins or your losses or your successes or your failures, and not everyone does, you're right, but a large part of our group of people enjoy having that collective social experience because, and again, it's a young audience on StockTwits. They're sharers, they're learners, they're DIYers. They want to experience things with each other and to learn from them. So I also don't think in retail equity trading there's a big downside to sharing a position or an idea. Okay. You're happy when you're successful.
I saw you check your phone at the top of the stairs before you walked down. Were you checking the most active rooms right now? What's going on in StockTwits right now?
So I was checking the most active tickers and rooms. But the most active rooms on any given day, I think the last couple of days, there have been things going on around the chip makers. There have been things going on around, I think Tesla was very hot yesterday. I'll tell you what, let's do a real time check right now. On a room side, cannabis investing, I think because some of the there was some, research that came out about some of the cannabis companies.
While you ping the community, I'm going to ask Anthony a question.
Go ahead.
So we talked about some tools, and we talked about both moderation and surveillance and kind of how you keep the community safe. But you also have some engagement tools as well. So Anthony, walk us through the tools that you guys have built on the platform. Number one, to keep it safe and to keep it a bit regulated. Then also the engagement tools you have.
So Ian hit the big notes. We work with a third party called Sift Science, who we feed real-time data to, everything from IP addresses that people are coming from to the actual contents of the message that they post. They feed that through a bunch of machine learning algorithms that they use to either automatically ban bad actors as soon as they recognize them if something is particularly severe, or in other cases, they just bring them to the attention of our moderation team to say, hey, take a look at this guy, he might need some attention. But beyond that, most of the moderation is actually done by human beings, both who work for us and who have been appointed as moderators in the community.
So I'll give you a little here's what's going on in the community. I wish I could airplay to this, but I don't think we can. Walgreens, Boots, Shopify, Bitcoin, Sangamo Biosciences, not something I know. And then the most active rooms at this moment are marijuana. Honestly, shocking. There's you could have a whole conversation just about that. Looks like buy the dip, Zacks 5 stocks. Zacks has a premium room with us. Networks, market memes. So market memes is almost always popular. Market memes is just, people take a funny meme that they see on Instagram and they repurpose it with a heading about something going on in the markets. It's fun.
So my next question is, what differentiates you from your competitors? I think market memes and avocado money and obviously the different rooms that you offer. Number one, do you have competitors in this space?
Yeah, you knew my answer to this. Of course not. We have absolutely no competitors. But I say that joking because I think everyone would always say that. But the truth is that there is nothing really like StockTwits. I mean, you could say, obviously, look, I'm a big Twitter user. Financial Twitter is a great place to engage, and I do. And sometimes, occasionally, like a potential investor or somebody will say, well, why isn't, what about Twitter? It's like, we're 10 years old. I don't have to answer why not Twitter. The answer is self-evident that we grow more and more and more every year because we're a moderated community, because we have our own group of people, because we have our own tools and capabilities that are built on top of our community. And then I think just, stop it for a second.
Okay. Well, we'll switch to Anthony. He keeps talking about tools and the tools that you guys have built. I want to pivot a little bit to the tools that AWS has and that you're using. What are you most excited about that's in the service list that we're offering today? What are you experimenting with? I know we've had some conversations across the enterprise this morning. We had a chance to have an executive breakfast with some customers. And the general theme was excitement about tools and developers being able to access new toys. But in reality, in some of the enterprises, it can be difficult to actually be able to play with those toys as readily. In a startup, in the environment that you're able to actually give your developers access to that. What are you playing with today? What excites you about the platform?
Serverless is what we're most excited about. The ability to, we've gone from, like I said, managing servers and racks to, repeatable, scalable deployments to not having to think about servers at all. We think about code, we think about developing features with our code, and increasingly we don't have to think about infrastructure. We develop a new piece of software, we push the code to AWS Lambda, and it's deployed, it scales, we don't think about it beyond that. So that's particularly exciting for us. It lets our developers move very quickly. It lets us innovate. It's really quite
Anything
exciting.
that reduces friction, so our team can do what it needs to do, I guess.
Well, let's talk about that friction a little bit. So from a quickness perspective, how often are you able to actually push code to production?
As often as we can develop a feature or fix a bug. I mean, in practical terms, we limit it to once a day or a few times a week, but in certain cases, if we want to, we can just deploy immediately.
So this is another community exercise. How many of folks in the audience would love to be able to actually push code to production once a day or every couple of days? Some people still want to do it on a quarterly basis, I see. But we'll get there. We're going to work on that.
We beat that.
So social finance, relatively newer space. What's missing today? So you've got many organizations that are looking for the next thing. You're also thinking about the next thing, I think, for StockTwits as you look forward. What's missing in this space today? What's the gap that needs to be filled?
Yeah, so there really are two big trends that are affecting the answer to that question. One is, and I don't know how, in some spaces this is talked to death, so I apologize if it comes across that way, but there's this giant wealth transfer from one generation to another. A lot of that money is going to end up in traditionally managed places, like I'm sure many people in this room, where give me 125 basis points or 75 basis points, I'll take care of it all for yourself. And then there's a whole other side of the spectrum, which is like the E-Trades and Robinhoods and others, where it's like, here, you know what, we're going to give you the tools to do it yourself, but ultimately you're kind of on your own. And then there's a giant space and market in the middle of companies that are attempting in some way to help people do it themselves, but not leaving them completely on their own. And that's where we are. But the opportunity that exists is for companies and services, both large and small and established and new, to help people learn how to become better investors on their own for a generation of people who don't necessarily trust the existing infrastructure, or at least want to see newer tools deployed as part of it, and to do that in a way that is similar to how younger people, not just investors, but want to learn on their own, or in the wild, for lack of a better term, which is not, here's a bunch of courses, here's something you can go through. It's learning by doing, it's social, it's discovery, show me what the smartest people are doing, show me what my friends are doing, show me things that are similar to other things I've done in the past. So that's the first big trend, is just helping people do things on their own. And the second, which I think is almost a little bit more interesting from a technical point of view, which is that as tools and products and services around which used to be the moat, the ability to buy and sell used to absolutely be the limiting factor, and you could build all kinds of services around that, but as technology has evolved, things that are products and tools and services become more interchangeable with other things. They can be connected by APIs to other things. The other thing, in our view, in our thesis, is companies and communities that are able to highly engage users, that are able to keep users, that can, through a very easy customer acquisition, bring new people into those communities. And that is a very limiting, difficult thing to do. And if you have that, which obviously we do, then how can you do a better job of connecting or building the tools and services that will serve the community of people that already trust you? That's what we think is the biggest new trend, and what's missing is the interaction of companies that already have the loyalty and trust and established pathways with certain groups of people to then provide services on top that might have normally been offered by other kinds of parts of the industry.
Okay, thank you. Last question for both of you. I'm going to start with Anthony. Anthony, what do you think the future of the platform looks like from a technical perspective? You mentioned some serverless. As you think about the next 12 to 18 months for you guys, what are you thinking about from a technical perspective, and what the future of the platform looks like?
Increasingly, just the platform disappearing almost from the perspective of the developers. Like the developers being able to focus on building the features and the products that they want to build, and not thinking about the technology at all, which is sort of like how serverless is why serverless is exciting to us. We want to focus on actually building the product that we want to build, and not focus on the technology that underlies it.
Yeah. Okay. And then for you, Ian, what does the future of investing look like? I'd give you the big, hairy, hard question. You guys are serving a target audience, which, as you mentioned, is set to receive a large transfer of wealth that's coming. How are you preparing for that particular audience having the wealth?
Yeah, the biggest difference between our audience and my entire history in financial services prior to joining StockTwits. StockTwits is fun, and StockTwits users have fun, and they learn while they're having fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that there is a general perception, wielded and crafted and created across generations that investing and finance are supposed to be really hard and boring, and all those things don't have to be true. Our future is, if I could sum it up in like a thesis or a theme, is building on what we know can be a fun and engaging process without hurting yourself, without doing damage to your long-term future, but just learning in a fun, engaging way, and building tools and services and products on top of that double down on that fun and engagement, but teach people how to do things beyond just talk about investing.
So the motto is make investing fun again.
Yeah.
And make it accessible for everyone.
Accessibility, fun. I mean, all these words, democratization, and you read press releases, it's like word soup. But I'm telling you, and I hope everyone in this room, that the 70% of people who didn't raise their hands, I hope you all go on StockTwits. It's fun, it's engaging, it's addictive. there's a reason why we have 51 minutes a day time on site and 10 to 12 app opens a day, because people like to hang out and just talk about things, and I hope everyone tries it.
Well, I appreciate you guys in the way that you are on the cutting edge of finance. I appreciate the way that you are using our platform to actually power that. I know you've got some exciting things in the hopper for your business that are coming soon.
Yeah.
We'll look with great interest as you continue to build out on that. And please join me in thanking both Ian and Anthony for joining us for a chat.